I'm Bart Lawson, 67 years old, and until last month, I thought I knew what family meant. Winning $3 million in the lottery should have been the highlight of my retirement years. Instead, I ended up in the hospital with my arm broken in 2 places, betrayed by the woman my son married. What happened in that bank the next day, though, when they tried to steal my money, changed everything. If you're watching this, let me know where you're from and hit that subscribe button while I tell you how it all went down. I spent 42 years of my life as a carpenter in Portland. Honest work with my hands, creating things that would last. When my wife Martha passed away 5 years ago after 40 years of marriage, I downsized to a modest 1-bedroom apartment in the suburbs. Not much to look at, but it was clean, affordable on my fixed income, and close enough to the park where I could walk each morning, weather permitting. The walls were thin and the water pressure weak, but it was home. My son Thomas is 36, works as a sales manager at Westside Motors, a mid-size car dealership across town. He was always sharp with numbers, good with people, though never quite as ambitious as Martha and I had hoped. Still, he made decent money, enough to live comfortably if he managed it right. Thomas met Fiona at his college buddy's wedding 6 years ago. She caught the bouquet, and according to Thomas, his heart along with it. She was 32 then, slender with auburn hair and a laugh that filled the room. The first few times Thomas brought her around, I was impressed. She asked thoughtful questions about my carpentry, examined the small trinket boxes I made in my workshop with what seemed like genuine interest. She complimented the coffee table I had built for Thomas the Christmas before, running her fingers along the grain and commenting on the joinery. Their wedding 4 years ago was an extravagant affair at one of those renovated barns that cost more to rent than my first house did to buy. I contributed $20,000, nearly wiping out the small savings Martha and I had put aside. Thomas said they would keep it simple, but Fiona had other ideas. Designer dress, gourmet catering, top-shelf open bar. I smiled through it all, told myself it was their special day. But something in my gut twisted when I overheard Fiona complaining to her maid of honor about the flowers not being exactly the shade she ordered. Little things started adding up. The way she would roll her eyes when Thomas talked about his commission for the month. How she insisted on redecorating their starter home before they had even made 3 mortgage payments. The designer handbags that appeared on her arm every few months. Thomas started picking up extra shifts, working Sundays, looking more tired each time I saw him. After I retired 3 years ago, I started my little lottery ritual. Every Wednesday, I would walk to Morgan's corner store, buy a single ticket using the same numbers. Martha's birthday, our anniversary date, the day Thomas was born. $5 a week was my entertainment budget. Some old-timers go fishing or play bingo. I played the lottery. Never expected to win, of course. It was just something to look forward to, a small flutter of hope in a quiet life. Money got tight on my fixed income. Social Security and my modest pension covered the basics, but the medical bills were another story. Arthritis in my hands, the ones that had built homes and furniture for decades, required expensive medication. Some weeks I would skip meals to afford the pills that kept the pain at bay enough for me to hold a coffee cup. Thomas and I used to have dinner every Sunday. After the wedding, that dwindled to twice a month. Then once if I was lucky. He always had an excuse. Working late. Fiona planned something. Too tired. When they did visit, I noticed changes in their appearance. Thomas wore an expensive watch he couldn't possibly afford on his salary. Fiona arrived in clothes with labels I recognized from magazine ads. They traded in Thomas's practical sedan for a luxury SUV with monthly payments I could only imagine. Their house underwent renovation after renovation. New kitchen with marble countertops, backyard landscaping that belonged in a magazine. All while Thomas looked increasingly exhausted, the circles under his eyes darkening. When I asked if everything was okay financially, he would paste on a smile and say they were investing in their future. But I noticed how he flinched when Fiona pulled out her credit card at restaurants, ordering the most expensive items on the menu. Fiona became the gatekeeper to my son's time. Every invitation had to go through her, every plan subject to her approval. Thomas stopped dropping by spontaneously. Our conversations grew shorter, more superficial. He started using phrases that didn't sound like him, talking about appearances and status in ways the boy I raised never would have cared about. I kept my concerns to myself. Thomas was a grown man, and Martha had always warned me not to meddle in his relationships. So I watched from a distance as my son slowly disappeared behind the facade of the life Fiona was constructing for them, hoping he was truly happy despite my misgivings. It was an ordinary Tuesday in April when I bought the ticket that would change everything. The morning was damp, typical Portland spring weather, with rain that couldn't decide if it wanted to fall or just hang in the air. My arthritis was acting up something fierce, but I needed milk and the weekly ticket was my little tradition. Morgan's corner store had been there since before I moved to the neighborhood. Walter Morgan, the owner, was behind the counter as always, his silver hair thinning but still combed neatly to the side. He greeted me by name as I entered, asked about my garden window herbs like he did every week. "The basil's coming in nice," I told him, setting my milk on the counter. "Might have enough for a decent pesto by next month." "Save me a jar," Walter said, ringing me up. "And the usual ticket?" I nodded, handing over my $5. Walter printed the ticket with my numbers, the same ones I'd been playing for 3 years. Martha's birthday, June 8th, the numbers 6 and 8. Our wedding anniversary, October 12th, the 10 and 12. Thomas's birthday, February 21st, the numbers 2, 2 and 1. "Good luck, Bart," Walter said like he always did. "Maybe this is the week." I thanked him, tucked the ticket into my wallet beside my ID, and thought nothing more about it. 3 days later, I nearly forgot to check the numbers. I was alone in my apartment, watching a rerun of an old Western when the lottery announcement came on during a commercial break. I almost muted it, but some habit made me reach for my wallet instead. The host's voice faded into background noise as the numbered balls appeared on screen. First the 6, then 8. My heart did a little jump, but I tamped it down. 2 matching numbers might win me $10. Nothing to get excited about. Then came the 1, 0, and 1, 2 in sequence. My fingers felt numb as I gripped the ticket tighter. 4 numbers. That had never happened before. When the final 2, 2, and 1 appeared, I couldn't breathe. I checked the ticket against the screen display 3 times, convinced I was misreading something. But the numbers matched. All 7 of them, in the exact order. The host was saying something about a $3 million jackpot. No one had hit the big prize in weeks, allowing it to grow, and now those numbers were on the ticket in my trembling hands. I didn't sleep that night. I kept the ticket on my bedside table, getting up every hour to check that it was still there, that the numbers hadn't somehow changed. By dawn, my eyes were gritty from lack of sleep, but my mind was racing with possibilities. As soon as the clock hit 8, I called the number printed on the back of the ticket. The lottery commission representative confirmed what I still couldn't quite believe. I had won $3 million before taxes. They explained I would need to come to their office to verify the ticket and fill out paperwork. After federal and state taxes, I would receive approximately $1.8 million. They asked if I wanted publicity or to remain anonymous. I chose anonymity immediately. The representative suggested bringing a financial advisor to the claim appointment and provided names of professionals experienced with lottery winners. My first instinct was to call Thomas, but I hesitated. Something told me to wait until the money was secure, until I had a plan. But he was my only family, and I wanted to share the news with someone. After staring at my phone for 20 minutes, I finally dialed his number. Thomas sounded distracted when he answered, something clattering in the background. I asked if he was busy, and he said he was just finishing up some paperwork at home. "I have some news," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Good news, actually." "What's up, Dad?" Thomas asked, his tone shifting slightly, more attentive. "I won the lottery." Silence on the line. Then, very funny, "What's really going on?" "I'm serious, Thomas. $3 million. I matched all the numbers." Another silence. Longer this time. I heard him say something away from the phone, his voice muffled. Then Fiona's voice in the background, asking questions I couldn't make out. "Dad, are you absolutely sure?" Thomas finally asked, his voice different now, higher pitched with excitement or disbelief. "Yes, I've called the lottery commission. I have to go in next week to claim it." "Oh my God," Thomas said. Then, away from the phone again, he really won. 3 million. More muffled conversation with Fiona that I couldn't quite catch. When Thomas came back on the line, his words tumbled out quickly. "We should celebrate. Can we take you to dinner? Tonight? Fiona says we should go to Sullivan's." Sullivan's Steakhouse was one of the most expensive restaurants in Portland. I had never been there. "I don't know, Thomas. I'm still processing this. Please, Dad. This is huge. We need to celebrate as a family." The word family made me relent. And maybe I did want to share this moment, this incredible stroke of luck, with my son. "All right. Sullivan's at 7? Perfect. We'll make a reservation right now." After hanging up, I sat for a long while on my worn sofa, staring at the ticket. I should have felt elated, but instead, I felt a strange unease. I carefully placed the ticket in my home safe, a small fireproof box hidden behind Martha's photograph in the bedroom. As I closed the safe, I looked into Martha's smiling eyes in the photo and whispered, "What do you think, old girl? Did we finally get lucky?" I could almost hear her cautioning me to be careful, to think before acting. Martha had always been the prudent one. I arrived at Sullivan's Steakhouse 20 minutes early, nervous energy making it impossible to sit in my apartment any longer. The hostess led me to a corner table, with soft lighting and gleaming silverware that made me acutely aware of my weathered hands and bargain store jacket. Thomas and Fiona arrived 10 minutes late. I almost didn't recognize them at first. Thomas wore a tailored suit I'd never seen before, and Fiona was draped in a black dress with jewelry that caught the light with every movement. They looked like they belonged in this restaurant in a way I clearly didn't. "Dad!" Thomas embraced me with unusual enthusiasm. Fiona followed, enveloping me in a cloud of expensive perfume as she kissed my cheek. "You look wonderful, Bart," she said, squeezing my arm. "Have you done something different with your hair?" My hair was exactly as it had been for the past 20 years, thinning and combed to the side. I had gotten a trim 2 weeks ago, but nothing Fiona would have noticed under normal circumstances. She had never commented on my appearance before. Throughout the appetizers, Fiona kept touching my hand when she spoke, laughing at comments I made that weren't particularly funny. Thomas drank his whiskey faster than usual, ordering a second before the entrees arrived. His eyes darted between Fiona and me, his smile fixed but not reaching his eyes. "So," I said after our steaks arrived, "I've been thinking about this money." 2 pairs of eyes locked onto me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "I need to be smart about it," I continued. "After taxes, it'll be about 1.8 million. First, I want to pay off my medical debts and set up a health fund for future expenses." "Of course, Dad." Thomas nodded eagerly. "I'm thinking of moving to a slightly bigger apartment. Nothing fancy, but maybe with a small workshop space. And I want to help you too, Thomas." Fiona leaned forward, her fork forgotten. "That's so generous, Bart. Family should always come first." I was thinking of setting aside 200,000 for Thomas, to help with your mortgage or any debts. Fiona's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. "Oh, that's thoughtful." Thomas glanced at her, then back at me. "What about the rest, Dad?" "Most will go into secure investments. I need this to last the rest of my life. I'm also considering donating to the trade school that helped me start my carpentry career. They have a program for at-risk youth that does good work." Fiona's hand moved to Thomas's arm, her fingers pressing visibly into his sleeve. "But you have so much now. Surely you want to enjoy it. Maybe a vacation home we could all use. Or Thomas has some business ideas that could really benefit from investment." This was the first I'd heard of Thomas having business ideas. He'd been at the car dealership for 12 years and never mentioned entrepreneurial ambitions. "I'm not looking to make risky investments," I said carefully. "At my age, security is the priority." "But we're family," Fiona said, leaning even closer. "We should share everything equally." The word equally hung in the air. I looked at Thomas, whose expression was torn between agreeing with his wife and recognizing the presumption in her statement. "I want to help you," I said directly to Thomas. But this money needs to secure my future first. I don't want to be a burden to you if my health declines." "You wouldn't be a burden," Thomas said quickly, though we both knew that wasn't true. His salary couldn't cover extensive elder care on top of the lifestyle he and Fiona maintained. "We could help you manage it," Fiona suggested, her tone shifting to something businesslike. "Thomas has a friend who's a financial advisor. He could show you how to maximize returns while supporting family priorities." "I've already scheduled a meeting with an advisor the Lottery Commission recommended," I replied. "Someone who specializes in windfalls like this." Fiona's expression hardened momentarily before she manufactured another smile. "Well, we just want what's best for you, Bart, don't we, Thomas?" Thomas nodded, but his eyes wouldn't meet mine. The rest of dinner was tense beneath a veneer of celebration. Fiona ordered the most expensive dessert and a bottle of champagne I couldn't pronounce. When the check came, I paid without looking at the total, aware that a week ago, this single meal would have been beyond my means. The drive home was quiet, my thoughts circling around the subtle shift I'd witnessed. Thomas had dropped me off, promising to call tomorrow, but his goodbye felt hollow. Over the next 3 days, my phone buzzed constantly with messages from Fiona, ideas for investment opportunities, links to properties she thought I might like, all well beyond what I'd consider reasonable even with my new wealth. Suggestions for upgrading my lifestyle with luxury items I had no interest in. Thomas called on the 3rd day. His voice sounded rehearsed, using phrases I recognized from Fiona's texts. "We should really discuss a family wealth strategy, Dad. Fiona's been researching the best approaches for multi-generational prosperity." The lottery check was processed through my new bank account by the end of the week. The financial advisor, a steady woman named Janet with practical shoes and 20 years of experience, helped me allocate most of it into secure investments, with a portion set aside for immediate needs and the gift I planned for Thomas. "Most lottery winners go broke within 5 years, Janet told me. They change their lifestyle dramatically or make poor investment decisions. The ones who maintain their wealth are those who make gradual changes and focus on security." I took her advice to heart, setting up automatic transfers to keep most of my money out of immediate reach. I started looking for a slightly larger apartment, arranged to pay off my medical bills, and bought one indulgence, a new set of high-quality woodworking tools I'd coveted for years. A week after the money was securely in my accounts, Fiona showed up unannounced at my apartment. She carried an elaborate gift basket wrapped in cellophane, filled with gourmet foods I didn't recognize, and a bottle of expensive scotch. "Surprise!" she beamed, pushing past me into the apartment. "I thought we should have a proper celebration, just the two of us." She set the basket down and immediately began moving through my small space, opening cabinets, running her finger along shelves, commenting on what could be upgraded or replaced. "This place is so cozy," she said, in a tone that made it clear she meant cramped and outdated. "Have you started looking at new homes yet?" "I'm considering a 2-bedroom apartment in this same building," I replied. "Nothing extravagant." Fiona laughed as if I'd made a joke. "But you can afford so much more now. Why stay in this neighborhood when you could have a view of the river?" She settled herself on my sofa, crossing her legs and patting the cushion beside her. Reluctantly, I sat down. "Bart, I wanted to talk to you about something important." Her voice dropped to a confidential tone. "Thomas doesn't know I'm here. He's too proud to ask for help, but we're in a bit of a situation." "What kind of situation?" "Financial." She smoothed her skirt, avoiding my eyes. "We've accumulated some debt over the past few years. About 90,000 in credit cards." The figure shocked me. That was more than Thomas would make in a year, even with good commissions. "How did that happen?" I asked. "Investments that are just about to pay off. Renovations that will increase our home value. Normal life expenses." She waved a manicured hand dismissively. "The point is, we have this amazing opportunity to invest in a business venture with my cousin. It's practically guaranteed to double our money in 6 months, but we need capital immediately." The rehearsed quality of her speech made my carpenter's instinct for measuring twice before cutting kick in. "Does Thomas know about this investment opportunity?" "Of course," she said quickly. Too quickly. "He's very excited about it. But we'd need at least 300,000 to make it worthwhile." What kind of business is it? Fiona's explanation was vague, full of buzzwords like emerging market and disruptive technology, but suspiciously short on specific details. When I pressed for more information, she became defensive. You don't need to worry about the details, Bart. We have professionals handling all that. What matters is that this is a chance for Thomas to finally break free from that dead-end job selling cars. I promised to think about it, mostly to end the increasingly uncomfortable conversation. After she left, I called Thomas at work. "Dad, can I call you back?" He answered hurriedly. "I'm with a customer." "It's important, Thomas. It's about money." There was a pause. Then I heard him excuse himself. When he came back on the line, his voice was lower. "What about money?" "Fiona just visited me. She mentioned your $90,000 in credit card debt." Silence, then a sharp intake of breath. "It's not that bad," he said, but his voice was uncertain. "She also mentioned an investment opportunity with her cousin. $300,000. Her what?" "Dad, I don't know what she's talking about." "Her cousin Tim? He runs a failing gym in Tacoma." The confirmation of my suspicion was both vindicating and deeply troubling. "She said you knew all about it, that you were excited." Another long silence. "I need to go, Dad. I'll call you tonight." He didn't call that night or the next day. Instead, both Thomas and Fiona appeared at my door the following evening. Thomas looked tense, Fiona determinedly cheerful. "Family dinner," she announced, holding up takeout bags from an expensive Thai restaurant I knew Thomas couldn't afford. "We need to catch up." Over spring rolls and curry, the conversation remained superficial until the food was nearly gone. Then Fiona cleared her throat. "Thomas and I have been doing some research, Bart. Did you know that lottery winners who share with family have much better outcomes than those who don't? There are so many sad stories about winners who lost relationships because they became selfish with their windfalls." Thomas stared at his plate, pushing rice around with his fork. I noticed he'd barely touched his wine while Fiona's glass had been refilled twice. "I don't plan on being selfish," I said carefully. "As I mentioned, I want to help Thomas with some of your expenses. The thing is," Thomas finally spoke, his voice uncharacteristically harsh, "200,000 isn't really going to change our situation long term. We need a more substantial investment." "Investment in what exactly?" "Our future," Fiona jumped in. "Thomas has been wasting his potential at that dealership. We want to open our own business, be independent." When I asked for a business plan, financial projections, or any concrete details, neither of them had answers. Instead, Thomas's expression grew increasingly agitated. "Why can't you just help us?" he demanded. "You have all this money now. It's not like you earned it. You just got lucky." His words stung more than I wanted to admit. "I've worked hard my entire life, Thomas. This luck, as you call it, is the first break I've ever gotten. And you won't even share it with your only son," he replied bitterly. "Some of that is my inheritance anyway. You're just making me wait for it." I stared at my son, barely recognizing him in that moment. "That's not how inheritance works, Thomas. And it's certainly not how I raised you to think." The conversation deteriorated from there. Fiona revealed they had used their house as collateral for a business loan for her online boutique venture, which had lost $40,000 in its first year. They had multiple maxed-out credit cards, 2 car payments they could barely afford, and were 3 months behind on their property taxes. "I'll make you a deal," I said finally. "I'll pay off $20,000 of your debt directly, not through you, but directly to the creditors. And I'll help you set up a meeting with my financial advisor to create a plan for getting out from under the rest." Fiona's face flushed with anger. "20,000? That's insulting. You have millions." $1.8 million, I corrected, "most of which is invested for my future care and security." "You don't need that much. You live like a pauper anyway," she snapped, gesturing around my modest apartment. "You could give us half and never notice the difference." "I'm not giving you half of my lottery winnings, Fiona. That's not reasonable." "We're family," she nearly shouted. "Family shares." Thomas finally placed a hand on her arm. "Fiona, that's enough." The evening ended with tense goodbyes and no resolution. 2 days later, I received a call from someone claiming to be Fiona's brother and a practicing attorney. He made vague threats about challenging my competency to manage my own finances due to my age, and suggested that unless I reconsidered my position on family support, they might need to take legal action for Thomas's rightful share. That call prompted me to meet with my own attorney, a referral from Janet, the financial advisor. We set up a proper trust, established legal protections for my assets, and documented the threats and unreasonable demands. As a precaution, I also changed the locks on my apartment after finding scratch marks around the keyhole one afternoon when I returned from grocery shopping. The day everything changed started normally enough. It was a Tuesday, cloudy but not raining, and I had walked to the local market for my weekly groceries. Nothing extravagant, just my usual items plus ingredients for a pot roast I was planning to make. Despite my new financial situation, I hadn't changed my shopping habits much. The same store, the same brand of coffee, the same modest list. I was carrying 2 bags, one in each hand, as I approached my apartment building. The weight pulled at my arthritic shoulders, but I'd refused delivery, wanting the exercise and normalcy of doing my own errands. As I reached the entryway, I spotted Fiona sitting on the small bench in the lobby. She wore a cream-colored pantsuit that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent, her hair pulled back in a severe knot. She stood when she saw me, a tight smile on her face. "Bart, I was hoping to catch you." Her voice was controlled, pleasant even, but something in her eyes put me on alert. "Fiona, is Thomas with you?" "No, he's at work. I thought we could have a private conversation. Clear the air." I shifted the grocery bags, my fingers already aching from the plastic handles. "Let me put these inside first." "I'll help you," she said, reaching for one of the bags. I hesitated but allowed her to take it. We rode the elevator to the 3rd floor in uncomfortable silence. As we reached my door, I set down my bag to fish out my keys. "I brought some paperwork for you to look at," Fiona said as I unlocked the door. "Some options for helping Thomas and me that I think you'll find reasonable." Inside my apartment, I took the bag from her and headed to the kitchen, hoping to establish some space between us. But Fiona followed close behind, placing a leather portfolio on my small dining table. "I know we got off on the wrong foot with all this," she said, unzipping the portfolio and removing a stack of documents. "Thomas and I were too emotional, too demanding. I see that now." Her conciliatory tone made me even more wary. In 4 years of knowing her, I'd never heard Fiona admit to being wrong about anything. "These are some more structured proposals," she continued, spreading papers across the table. "Investment opportunities where you maintain partial control, joint ventures, even a family trust option." I glanced at the documents, noting official-looking letterheads and fine print. "I'll need time to review these with my advisor. Actually, we need decisions today. Some of these opportunities have deadlines." I picked up one document, a power of attorney form with my name filled in and blank signature lines. "What's this?" "Just a standard authorization so we can move quickly when needed," Fiona said dismissively. "Financial institutions can be so slow without the proper paperwork in place." I set the paper down and stepped back from the table. "I'm not signing a power of attorney, Fiona. It's limited in scope," she pressed, her smile tightening. "Just for specific transactions." "No." I moved toward the door. "I think you should go. I'll look these over with my attorney and get back to you." Fiona didn't move. "We don't have time for that. Thomas is counting on this, Bart. His whole future depends on it." "On what exactly?" "None of these proposals make any sense for me. They all involve liquidating my investments and handing control to you and Thomas, or directly to this company I've never heard of." "You're being selfish." Fiona's voice rose slightly. "After everything Thomas has done for you." "Thomas has barely spoken to me in months, Fiona. Not until I won the lottery." I reached for the door handle, intending to open it and clearly end our meeting. Fiona moved surprisingly quickly, positioning herself between me and the exit. "You're not listening," she said, her pleasant mask slipping. "If you don't help us now, you're going to ruin Thomas's life. We have debts you don't even know about. People are threatening us." "What people? What are you talking about?" "It doesn't matter. What matters is we need at least $500,000 by next week, or everything falls apart. The figure had grown substantially from her previous requests. I already offered to help with $20,000 in financial counseling. That's nothing, she spat. Pocket change to you now. You're just being cruel, holding your own son hostage with your money. I tried to step around her. I'm not discussing this anymore. Please leave. Fiona blocked my movement, her face contorted with frustration. No, not until you agree to help us properly. Fiona, move away from the door. Instead, she grabbed my grocery bags from where I'd set them down, clutching them like hostages. Not until you sign these papers. We're family, Bart. You're supposed to take care of family. Give me my groceries and leave, I said firmly, reaching for the bags. What happened next occurred so quickly I had trouble describing it clearly to the police later. Fiona yanked the bags away, sending a can of soup rolling across the floor. I reached out instinctively, and she grabbed my outstretched arm. I expected her to push me away, but instead, she twisted my arm with shocking strength. The sound came first, a sickening crack that seemed to echo in the small entryway. Then the pain, white, hot, and breathtaking, radiating from my forearm. I stumbled backwards, colliding with the wall, my arm hanging at a grotesque angle that immediately told me it was broken. For a moment, Fiona looked as shocked as I felt. Then her expression changed, calculation replacing surprise, as she watched me slide down the wall to the floor, cradling my injured arm. "Look what you made me do," she said, her voice eerily calm. "This could all have been avoided if you'd just been reasonable." The pain was becoming overwhelming, black spots dancing at the edges of my vision. I needed help, but Fiona made no move toward a phone. "Now," she continued, crouching down to my eye level, "you're going to tell me your bank information and sign these papers, and then I'll call an ambulance." Even through the haze of pain, I understood the implicit threat. Help wouldn't come unless I gave her what she wanted. "Go to hell," I gasped, fumbling with my uninjured hand for the cell phone in my pocket. Fiona noticed the movement and tried to grab my other arm, but I twisted away, crying out as the motion jostled my broken bone. I managed to pull out the phone and hit the emergency call button before she could stop me. 911. "What's your emergency?" "Help," I gasped into the phone. "Broken arm. Assault. 317 Parkview Apartments. Unit 309. Fiona stood up, her face a mask of fury. "You'll regret this. We're getting that money tomorrow, one way or another." She gathered her documents with quick, angry movements. As she yanked open the door to leave, she nearly collided with my neighbor, Mrs. Abernathy, who stood in the hallway with wide, concerned eyes. I heard shouting, the elderly woman said, taking in the scene. Me on the floor, obviously injured. Fiona looming in the doorway. "Is everything all right?" "Mind your own business, old woman," Fiona snapped, pushing past her. "He fell. He's always falling. Probably needs a nursing home." Mrs. Abernathy, a retired nurse with a spine of steel despite her 80 years, was not so easily intimidated. She stepped into my apartment, her eyes never leaving Fiona's retreating form until she disappeared into the elevator. Then she knelt beside me, careful hands gently examining my arm without touching the injury itself. "Broken," she confirmed. "Ambulance coming." I nodded, the pain now consuming most of my ability to speak. "That wasn't a fall," Mrs. Abernathy said matter-of-factly. I heard what she said before she left. "I'm telling the police what I saw." The paramedics arrived within minutes, followed closely by a police officer. Through a fog of pain, I answered their initial questions. Yes, Fiona was my daughter-in-law. Yes, she had intentionally twisted my arm. No, this had never happened before. The ride to the hospital was a blur of movement and voices. In the emergency room, X-rays confirmed what was already obvious: a compound fracture of my right radius and ulna. The bones would require surgical repair with plates and screws. Officer Jackson, a steady presence with kind eyes and a notebook, took my full statement while I waited for surgery. He photographed the injury, made notes about Fiona's threats, and assured me they would follow up immediately. "Financial elder abuse escalating to physical violence is taken very seriously, Mr. Lawson," he explained. "We'll need a formal statement when you're feeling better, but we have enough to start an investigation now. As they prepared me for surgery, administering pain medication that finally dulled the relentless agony, my last coherent thought was of Thomas. Did he know what his wife had done? Was he part of whatever plan she had mentioned for tomorrow? The anesthesia pulled me under before I could find answers to these questions. I woke in a hospital room the next morning, my right arm encased in a heavy cast from hand to elbow and elevated on pillows. The pain was present but muted, managed by the medication dripping into my IV. A nurse explained that the surgery had gone well, but I would need 6 to 8 weeks in the cast, followed by physical therapy. My phone rang around 10 in the morning. I awkwardly answered it with my left hand, expecting Thomas or perhaps Officer Jackson. Instead, a woman's voice I didn't recognize said, "Mr. Lawson, this is Sandra Williams from First National Bank. I'm calling because there's a situation you should be aware of." "What kind of situation?" I asked, my mouth dry. "There are 2 people here, a Thomas and Fiona Lawson, attempting to access your accounts. They have what appears to be an authorization document with your signature, but our verification system flagged it for review." My heart pounded painfully against my ribs. "That's my son and his wife. I never signed any authorization. The signature must be forged." Sandra's voice lowered. "That's what we suspected. Our policy is to notify the account holder directly when there are verification issues. They're currently meeting with our branch manager while we process their request." "I need to come there," I said, already trying to sit up despite the pain the movement caused. "Sir, if you're unable to come in, we can handle this internally and contact the authorities." "No, I want to be there. I can be there in." I looked around the hospital room, realizing the complexity of my situation. "Can you stall them for an hour?" "Yes, we can certainly do that. Should I notify security to be present?" "Please do. And I'm going to call the police officer handling my case." After hanging up, I immediately called Officer Jackson, who had left his direct number. He answered on the second ring. "Mr. Lawson, how are you feeling this morning?" I quickly explained the situation at the bank. "They're trying to clean out my accounts with forged documents, just like she threatened." "Don't try to leave the hospital alone," Officer Jackson said firmly. "I'll pick you up myself in 20 minutes. This connects directly to our investigation." Getting discharged against medical advice required signing several forms, which was challenging with my left hand. The doctor strongly objected but couldn't legally keep me there. A nurse helped me change into the clothes I'd worn the day before, now wrinkled and still bearing traces of yesterday's confrontation. Officer Jackson arrived as promised, helping me into his patrol car with careful attention to my injured arm. The movement, despite my medication, sent waves of pain radiating from my fingers to my shoulder. "The bank manager is aware we're coming," he said as we drove. "They're keeping Thomas and Fiona in a conference room, under the pretense of processing their request. Security is stationed nearby." "Do you think Thomas knows what Fiona did to me?" I asked, watching the familiar streets pass by outside the window. Officer Jackson glanced at me, his expression thoughtful. "We'll find out soon enough. Sometimes people surprise you, Mr. Lawson. Not always in good ways." At the bank, we entered through a side door where Sandra, a professional-looking woman in her 40s, met us. She led us to a small office adjacent to the conference room where Thomas and Fiona waited. "They've been here for almost an hour," Sandra explained. "Miss Lawson has become increasingly agitated, demanding to speak with higher management. Mr. Lawson seems uncertain." Through a small window in the connecting wall, I could see them. Fiona sat ramrod straight in a business suit similar to yesterday's but in navy, a folder of documents before her. She was speaking intently to someone just out of view. Thomas sat beside her, his posture slumped, repeatedly loosening his tie as if it were choking him. The bank manager, Mr. Phillips, joined us in the small office. They presented a power of attorney document and a letter authorizing the transfer of $800,000 to an account in their names, he explained, showing us copies. The signature comparison system flagged it immediately, and our fraud department confirmed it's almost certainly forged. "It is," I confirmed, looking at the crude approximation of my signature. "I never signed this." "How do you want to handle this, Mr. Lawson?" Mr. Phillips asked. We can simply deny the transaction and escort them out, or, I want to confront them, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. With Officer Jackson present, Mr. Phillips looked uncertain. That's unusual, but given the circumstances, I can allow it. Officer Jackson will need to remain in an official capacity, however. Of course, Sandra brought me a glass of water and a pain pill from the prescription the hospital had given me. I took it gratefully, gathering my strength for what was to come. Officer Jackson positioned himself beside the door as Mr. Phillips led me into the conference room. The moment we entered, Fiona's face transformed from irritated entitlement to shocked disbelief. Her eyes locked onto my cast, then darted to Officer Jackson's uniform. Thomas turned more slowly, and the color drained from his face when he saw me. "Dad? What happened to your arm?" Before I could answer, Fiona recovered her composure, her expression morphing into concerned sympathy so quickly it was almost impressive. "Bart, you should be resting." "Thomas, your father had a terrible fall yesterday. I tried to help him, but he was confused, disoriented." "That's not what happened," I said quietly, lowering myself carefully into a chair across from them. "Officer Jackson, would you please tell my son why you're here?" The police officer stepped forward. "I'm investigating an assault that occurred yesterday at your father's apartment. Your wife is the primary suspect." Thomas's head swiveled between us, confusion evident. "Assault?" "Fiona said you fell coming back from the store, that she tried to help you but you were confused. She broke my arm, Thomas. Twisted it until the bone snapped because I wouldn't sign those documents you're trying to use today." Thomas turned to Fiona, who was already shaking her head vehemently. "That's ridiculous. He's elderly. He falls all the time. I tried to catch him but couldn't. Now he's confused about what happened." Mr. Phillips placed the documents on the table. "These authorization forms are forgeries, Mr. and Mrs. Lawson. Our system detected it immediately." "There must be some mistake," Fiona insisted, her voice rising slightly. "Bart signed these yesterday before his accident. He must have been shaky from the fall when he signed." "I was standing fine until you twisted my arm," I said, meeting her gaze steadily. "You said, and I quote, 'We're getting that money tomorrow, one way or another.' And here you are, trying to take almost half of everything I have." Officer Jackson stepped forward, placing a folder on the table. "We have photographs of Mr. Lawson's injury, consistent with his description of how it occurred. We also have a witness who heard your threats as you left the apartment. And now we have evidence of attempted fraud using forged documents." He opened the folder to reveal clinical photos of my arm before surgery, the unnatural angle and swelling evident. Thomas made a choking sound, his face ashen. "This is absurd," Fiona declared, though her voice lacked its earlier conviction. "Bart clearly fell. I was trying to help him up and he got confused. He's been showing signs of dementia for months now. Thomas, tell them." Thomas stared at the photographs, then at my cast, then finally at his wife. "You told me he fell, Fiona. You said he was confused, that we needed to secure his assets before he hurt himself or gave away his money to scammers." "He is confused," Fiona insisted. "He's been making irrational decisions since he got this money, refusing to help his own family while throwing away thousands on strangers. We're trying to protect him from himself." Mr. Phillips pointed to the documents. "By forging his signature to transfer $800,000 to yourselves." "It's not like that," Fiona said, her composure beginning to crack. "The money was meant to be managed for his benefit. Thomas, tell them." But Thomas was now staring at the power of attorney form, recognition dawning. "This is the same document you had at his apartment yesterday? The one you said he just needed to sign as a formality?" Fiona's silence was answer enough. "Did you break his arm, Fiona?" Thomas asked, his voice barely audible. "Of course not." "Hey, Fel, Mrs. Abernathy heard you," I said quietly. "She heard what you said before you left, and the x-rays clearly show a spiral fracture consistent with twisting, not falling." Thomas stood abruptly, backing away from the table, from Fiona. "All this time, you've been lying to me. About the debts, about where the money went, about Dad's mental state." "Don't be dramatic," Fiona snapped. but her carefully constructed facade was crumbling. Everything I did was for us, for our future. Your father doesn't need all this money. He lives like a pauper anyway. It's not fair. Fair? Thomas's voice rose. You broke my father's arm because he wouldn't give you his money, then tried to commit fraud. And you're talking about fair? Sir, Officer Jackson addressed Thomas. Did you have knowledge of the assault, or that these documents were forged? Thomas shook his head, looking stunned. No. God, no. Fiona told me Dad had fallen and hurt himself. She said he signed these yesterday before the accident. That we needed to act quickly, because he was becoming forgetful and making bad decisions. Fiona stood suddenly, gathering her things. This is ridiculous. I'm leaving. Thomas, come on. Ma'am, I need to ask you to remain here, Officer Jackson said, moving toward the door. There are questions that need to be answered regarding the assault and these forged documents. You can't keep me here, she snarled. Her composed demeanor completely vanished. I know my rights. Fiona Lawson. Officer Jackson's voice took on the formal tone of official police business. You are under investigation for assault and attempted fraud. I'd like you to come to the station voluntarily to answer questions, or I can place you under arrest now. For a moment, it seemed Fiona might try to push past him. Instead, she turned to Thomas, her expression suddenly pleading. Thomas, you can't believe this. Your father is confused, manipulating you to turn against me. We're so close to having everything we wanted. Thomas looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. You hurt my father. You lied to me. There is no we anymore, Fiona. Mr. Phillips nodded to someone outside the door, and 2 security guards entered. Miss Williams will escort you to a private room, Mrs. Lawson, while Officer Jackson determines next steps. Mr. Thomas Lawson, you're welcome to remain with your father if he wishes. As Fiona was led away, still protesting her innocence and threatening lawsuits, Thomas collapsed back into his chair, his face in his hands. Dad, I'm so sorry, he said, his voice muffled. I had no idea. She told me you were becoming confused, making bad decisions, that we needed to protect you from yourself. I believed her. I reached across the table with my good hand, resting it on his arm. We need to talk, son. About a lot of things. Thomas nodded, tears in his eyes as he gently touched my cast. I'll make this right somehow. I promise. Mr. Phillips discreetly left us alone in the conference room, where for the first time in years, my son and I began an honest conversation. The weeks following the bank confrontation passed in a blur of legal proceedings and painful healing. Fiona was formally charged with assault and attempted fraud after Officer Jackson's thorough investigation. The evidence against her was substantial. Mrs. Abernathy's witness statement, my medical records showing injuries consistent with my account, the forged documents, and ultimately, Thomas's testimony about the lies she had told him. Thomas filed for divorce within days of the incident. As their finances were untangled, he discovered the full extent of Fiona's deception, hidden credit card accounts, loans taken in both their names without his knowledge, a secret bank account containing funds from selling jewelry he thought she still owned. My physical recovery was slow and often frustrating. The cast immobilized my dominant arm for 6 weeks, making even simple tasks like buttoning a shirt or preparing a meal challenging. The orthopedic surgeon explained that at my age, bones heal more slowly, and the compound nature of the fracture complicated matters. Physical therapy would be essential for regaining function. Thomas surprised me by asking if he could temporarily move into my apartment. Just until I figure out what to do about the house, he explained. Fiona's still trying to claim half of it, and I can't stand being there with all the reminders. I cleared out the small second bedroom that had been serving as my storage space. It barely fit a twin bed and a small dresser, but Thomas seemed grateful for the sanctuary. Our first few days as roommates were awkward. Thomas was consumed by guilt, constantly apologizing and trying to do everything for me. I was still processing the betrayal. Not just Fiona's, but the realization that my son had been willing to believe I was mentally incompetent based solely on his wife's claims. One evening, about 2 weeks in, as Thomas was washing dishes after dinner, the dam finally broke. I should have seen it, he said, his back to me, hands submerged in soapy water. All the red flags were there from the beginning. What red flags? I asked, though I had my own list. The constant pressure to earn more, buy more, appear more successful than we were. Nothing was ever enough for her. His shoulders slumped. She made me feel like I was failing her by only being a car salesman, like I was less of a man for not being wealthy. Why didn't you ever talk to me about this? Thomas turned, drying his hands on a dish towel. Fiona convinced me you wouldn't understand, that you were from a different generation, one that settled for less. She said your modest lifestyle was a sign of lack of ambition, not contentment. The words stung, but I recognized the manipulation behind them. And you believed that? I wanted to believe I could be more, do more, have more. Thomas sat heavily at the kitchen table. It was flattering at first, having someone believe I was capable of greatness. But the goalposts kept moving. Every achievement became inadequate almost immediately. Over the following weeks, as my arms slowly healed, Thomas and I rebuilt our relationship through painful honesty. He admitted to the constant financial pressure, the fights about spending, the growing distance between us that Fiona had carefully engineered. I acknowledged my own failure to speak up about my concerns, my willingness to fade into the background rather than risk confrontation. 3 months after the incident, with my cast removed and physical therapy well underway, I met with my financial advisor Janet and my attorney to finalize decisions about my lottery winnings. With their guidance, I established an education fund for neighborhood kids interested in trade school. The memory of struggling to afford my own carpentry training decades ago made this particularly meaningful. I also invested in renovating a small commercial space near my apartment building, converting it into a workshop where I could teach basic woodworking skills to youth from the community center. Working with my hands again, even with limitations from my injury, brought purpose back to my days. The look on teenagers' faces when they completed their first project, something tangible they had created themselves, was worth more than any luxury Fiona had coveted. Thomas found a new job away from the pressures of luxury car sales, working instead for a company that specialized in fleet vehicles for small businesses. The pay was steadier, the hours more reasonable, and for the first time in years, he seemed at peace with his work. The legal proceedings against Fiona concluded with a plea deal. She avoided jail time, but received probation, community service, financial penalties, and a restraining order preventing her from contacting either Thomas or me. According to Thomas's attorney, she had already moved back to her hometown in another state. On the 1-year anniversary of my lottery win, Thomas and I had dinner at a modest local restaurant, a far cry from Sullivan's Steakhouse where this journey had begun. I have someone I'd like you to meet, Thomas said over dessert. Her name is Karen. She's a teacher at the high school near my new place. We've been having coffee after I volunteer at their weekend woodshop program. The one I told you about? I asked, pleased that Thomas had taken up my suggestion to share his own carpentry skills, learned in our garage workshop when he was a teenager. Yeah, she runs it. No-nonsense woman. Drives a 10-year-old Honda she paid off years ago and refuses to replace because it still works just fine. He smiled, a genuine expression I hadn't seen in years. She thinks it's cool that I know how to build things. Actually cool, not cool as in you could make money from this. 2 months later, I moved to a slightly larger apartment in the same building. Nothing extravagant, but with enough space for a small workbench by the window where the light was good. Thomas found his own place, a simple 1-bedroom near his job, and slowly began rebuilding his credit and his life. I continued my volunteer work at the local retirement community, teaching basic woodworking to fellow seniors. Most projects were simple: birdhouses, jewelry boxes, picture frames, but the companionship and purpose they provided were priceless. Several of the men had been tradesmen in their younger days, and we exchanged techniques and stories while our gnarled hands shaped wood into useful objects. The money that had nearly torn my family apart now sat mostly in secure investments, growing quietly to ensure my independence as I aged. I maintained my modest lifestyle, splurging occasionally on high-quality tools or rare hardwoods for special projects, but finding my greatest satisfaction in relationships and creativity rather than possessions. Sometimes when I'm working with a particularly beautiful piece of cherry or walnut, I think about how Fiona could never understand the value of taking raw materials and carefully, patiently shaping them into something that will last generations. She saw only price tags and status, missing the deeper wealth of creating rather than consuming. The lottery didn't change who people were. It merely revealed their true characters more clearly. Thomas, despite his temporary deviation, returned to the values I'd tried to instill. Fiona showed her true priorities when faced with unexpected wealth, and I discovered that at 67, I was still capable of standing my ground, even against those I loved. My arm aches sometimes, especially when rain is coming. The metal plates and screws that hold the bones together will remain for the rest of my life, a permanent reminder of what happens when money becomes more important than family. But I can still shape wood, still create, still pass on the skills that defined my working life. True wealth, I've learned, isn't about the numbers in a bank account. It's about having enough to meet your needs while finding purpose that gets you out of bed each morning. It's about relationships based on genuine care rather than what others can provide. It's about seeing people for who they truly are, not who you wish them to be or what they pretend to be. What's your experience with money and relationships? Has financial change revealed surprising things about people in your life? Drop a comment below to share your story. And if you found value in mine, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more real-life experiences. Every story shared helps someone else feel less alone in their struggles. Thank you for listening, and remember, the true measure of wealth is peace of mind and purpose in your days.